Welcome back to Driving with Marley, the podcast that shapes the future of family office investments and partnerships. Today, I get to sit down with someone that I genuinely admire, not just as a founder, but as a husband, a father, and a leader who has built with real intention. Nate Checketts is the CEO and the founder of Rhone, one of the best clothing companies in the entire world. This is one of my favorite conversations, honest, grounded, full of life and personal lessons, and hopefully one that makes a huge impact on you here through the holiday season. Let's get into it with my friend, and hopefully soon to be yours, Nate Checketts. All right, we've got Nate Checketts with us from Rhone. How's it going, bro?
Good, man. It's good to see you.
It's good to see you too. So I think the last time that we saw each other was in July in the mountains of Colorado, and it was the first time we actually met. We were in a great group of fellow business leaders and investors and founders and entrepreneurs, and just at its core, great people. We were brought together from Tim Tebow and some other folks out there. And it was really just an opportunity to meet some new folks. Like, we met each other for the first time, to really be inspired by our faith and how we're bringing that into the business world, and discipling in the business world, and also just to spend social time together. And so it was really, I struck a conversation with you, and I was like, Rhone, I've heard of Rhone, but I don't own any Rhone. And actually, Ricky Kaplan, who's one of our mutual friends, he said, Rhone's one of my favorite brands. So thank you for taking the time to be on the podcast. I'm excited to learn more about Rhone. I'm actually wearing my gear that you so graciously gave away at that event. But excited to have you. You know, for the audience, Nate, give it
just for the record. You look even more handsome than normal now.
I mean, it's hard to do that these days. My wife texted me earlier. I was on a parent-teacher conference with her and our teacher, and she said, "You're hot." It's like, wow, you haven't said that.
There you go. It's the power of Rhone. Everyone needs it in their life.
I need to get more of these. But tell the audience really quick, just, you know, the 2-second background. Who is Nate Checketts, both as a man, as an individual, as a family man, as a business person, and what is Rhone? And then we'll start the conversation in a lot of directions after that.
Yeah, well, big open-ended question, so I'll try and keep it brief. First and foremost, you know, I'm a very fortunate father of 3 incredible boys, married to my wife of 20 plus years. You know, they really are such a core part of everything that I think and do. But my foundation really is built on my faith. And, you know, my wife and I talk a lot about how we're united by our faith. And you know, I don't know if you've ever heard this analogy, but it's like a triangle where, you know, the closer you move towards God and a common purpose, the closer you get to each other. And so that's really been at the foundation of my life from the beginning. I was raised by 2 incredible parents. My dad worked in the world of professional sports. My mom went back to school after I graduated high school. I was the 3rd child, and she got a master's degree and became a marriage and family therapist. And we joke that we were her patients before she went back to school and actually got her official degree. But I was raised with this real incredible yin yang of, you know, my dad was my coach, pushed me physically, and, you know, really inspired me in so many ways. And my mom was, you know, my mental health coach. And so I've always been a bit of an entrepreneur. When I was I was 14, I started my first kind of official business. It was a summer camp that we ran out of my parents' backyard. And it started small, but the camp ran for 8 years. We were making like 50 grand as teenagers, you know, bringing kids through, teaching them how to play sports. I didn't know it at the time, but my parents increased their liability policy on the house while we were doing this, and they put a cap on how many kids. We were oversold by a wide margin because it became known that this was like the fun camp for kids to go to, where we would actually play with them. And so I've always embraced this idea of teaching people physical fitness while also teaching them kind of emotional resilience, which is what my mom instilled in me in such a powerful way. And so Rhone launched 11 years ago. I had been working at the National Football League. I built a company in college in sports technology that I sold to the 49ers. And then I ended up working at the NFL. And while I was there, I really missed that startup environment feel. and my brother was working at IMG College, and we started talking about this idea of why isn't there a men's focused premium performance lifestyle brand? Performance lifestyle isn't the word that we use, but like premium activewear. Because it's what we were seeing in the market. A lot of these big box brands that we had grown up with, Nike, Reebok, Adidas, Under Armour, the stuff had gotten cheaper and cheaper over time. The distribution had become so vast and massive that the quality wasn't good. And the quality was amazing and innovative on the women's side of the products, but brands like Lululemon, men were hesitant to wear. And it came to a forefront while I was working at the NFL. I love to tell this story. One of my closest friends at the league, we sat right next to each other, and we had an event coming up, and we received this big box of gear for the event. Now, Nike was an official partner to the NFL. And so the guys got Nike product and the women got Lululemon product. And I had just received a pair of Lululemon sweatpants from my mom for Christmas. So I was like openly asking the group, I'm like, this is weird. Nike makes women's product and Lululemon makes men's product. And my friend turns to me, he's like, Nate, do not tell me that you wear Lululemon. I was like, hold on. I didn't say I have a pair of their sweatpants. These are two different things. And he's like, no, that's totally cool. Like, do you buy your underwear at Victoria's Secret? And I remember just thinking, this is such a weird thing that is going on. And my brother, who was at IMG, he had a similar experience playing soccer down on Duke's campus and being called names by the guys there for wearing a pair of Lululemon shorts. So we started having this conversation.
Roughly what year is this? 2012?
This is 2012, 2011, 2012.
Yep.
Lululemon had kind of really come down to the US in a big way and was growing, especially in premium markets. And so we just said, look, there's an opportunity to build a men's focused brand that has premium qualities, but that guys are proud to wear and excited to wear. And that's how we started. And it was a side hustle. Like we were doing it completely on the side. And then the Wall Street Journal found out about the brand, and in their lifestyle section, there's this massive headline: "These guys want you to stop wearing your wife's yoga brand." And from there on out, it was like trying to keep up with production and continuing to design and innovate. And I left my full-time job and convinced him to do the same. And we've been going after it for 11 years. And, the business, the reason why I start with kind of that physical fitness, mental resilience, our mission from the beginning is to really teach people about whole body health, which is physical and mental. It's not just about being physically fit. It's also about being mentally fit and teaching people what that means and how to take care of your mind as well as your body. And it's been a really powerful mission for us. And we're really excited about the work that we're doing in that space and the partners that we have, like Kevin Love and the Kevin Love Foundation and the NBA and the LPGA. We're omni-channel. So we've got 25 retail stores today. We're opening quite a few more in the next couple of years. And then we've got most of our business is e-com. And then we've got a little bit of wholesale business with partners like Nordstrom and Bloomingdale's and others.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that story. There's a couple different ways that I want to take that. You mentioned early on your upbringing. For those that don't know, your dad is Dave Checketts, very involved with the Utah Jazz and the New York Knicks and Legends and a lot. And then your mom went back to school, became a marriage and family therapist. I mean, what a blessing that likely was to have that type of resource.
Still is.
On you.
Yeah.
Growing up in that household, what things do you look back on now? You're in your early 40s. You look back on and say, holy cow, I was really blessed to have parents like that, but they instilled X in me at an early age that I still have and I give to my kids today. What are some of those principles, whether from the sports side and your dad as a father figure or your mom as someone who was likely very, listened a lot and had great intellect and how to respond, which a lot of our parents, I'm figuring it out every day with my 3 kids, right?
Totally. Yeah.
What did you take away from your parents that still sits with you today as a parent?
I really won the parental lottery as far as parents go. They're both such amazing people. and it's interesting, especially living and working in and around New York. A lot of people know my dad from his time at the Garden, 90s Knicks, 90s Rangers, and and whether they say it outright, which sometimes they do, or not, they'll kind of say, well, you were kind of handed a golden spoon. I'm like, you're right. You're just missing one part of the equation. You got to give my mom some credit in this as well. Um, my dad was an incredible mentor to me and an example. There's that old adage with parents, always teach and when necessary, use words. That's really something he lives by, just the way he treats people. He knew every usher at the Garden. He knew their name. He knew in some cases what they were going through. And those little things, those little details stand out to you. And you go to a game and he's addressing an usher by name. And all of a sudden you're kind of thinking, wait a minute, he treated that guy the same way as he treated Patrick Ewing in the locker room. That kind of means that everybody matters, right? That everybody has value and purpose. And he was an extremely hard worker, but he didn't miss my football games or the key moments in my life. He was always there. So it was this balance of me feeling like I know he's going to work hard, but he's also the first one to like jump in a swimming pool or down a slip and slide, or he's just kind of amazing that way. And my mom, not one whit behind. I mean, she's incredibly energetic in her approach and kind and the best listener you can imagine. So you can kind of like fall apart in front of her, and she'll help you pick up the pieces. And so much of what I learned, I think I observed, and versus having it be explicitly taught. And they really authentically lived what they, the values that they tried to espouse in us. And so I think in terms of what I'm trying to teach my kids often more than not is remind myself to lecture less and actually live the values that I strive to teach more, because in the end, I feel like that's ultimately what they learn from. And if I ever see one of my boys kind of behaving in a way that I feel like is inappropriate, I always first self-assess, like, is it possible that I, inadvertently taught them that? And then, quiet moments, speaking with them, spending time with them. If my dad wanted to have a serious conversation, he wouldn't like just sit me down and look at me. We'd go out and we'd throw a ball together, or we'd go and move together. And that's part of what we teach at Rhone. We do these events called Mind and Muscle, where we do 25 to 30-minute bodyweight workouts with a group of 12 to 15 people. And then we sit down and we have a group discussion. And you wouldn't believe the amount of emotion and openness that comes after people move their body. There's a huge mind and muscle connection there. And so I think I really learned that from both my parents, and I'm trying to instill those values in my children.
How do you balance that as I assume a very busy working professional dad? You have 3 or 4 kids, right?
3, yeah.
3 kids. It's one thing. It's great to have that example, right? Your dad tried to make every game. He was, ultra successful. I'm curious, 2 questions actually. One, with having won the parent lottery, did you have a feeling as you're going through school, university, or otherwise, of having to prove yourself and against that notion that you had the silver spoon or the golden spoon? And then 2, related but unrelated, as a working professional dad who's got a great company that's thriving today, what are some actionable things that you're trying to do or that you have part of your daily routine to be that present dad or to lead by example? Any recent examples or anything you can share?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question. Like I say, the moment I met you, I really admired your curiosity. You ask good questions, which makes you a good podcast host. But I would say that a couple of things stand out to me, as I reflect on this. The first is that, I'm okay with a bit of what I call the messy middle. And that is that I'm a work in progress. I'm never finished. When I was younger, that was something that was a challenge for me. And it's not that my parents, put pressure on me. I put so much pressure on myself. I had heard stories about how my parents really, didn't take a dime from their parents, and that they figured it out and they worked through things together. And while, I think for the most part that really is true, when I went to college, I was like, I don't want, you guys can pay tuition. I'm paying for everything else. And I was committed to that. And I grinded myself through college. I mean, I worked, my wife and I got married while I was in college. We both worked. And we were kind of committed to kind of getting through that experience together. And my first startup, I couldn't have health insurance anymore through the college. So I was like, you know what? I don't really need health insurance. It's overrated. And in a period of 3 months, I broke my leg, which was the first bone I had ever broken in my body. And it required surgery. I had to get a plate and 6 screws. I got diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, and my wife got pregnant with our first child unexpectedly. And, and so we were sitting there like, how on earth are we going to survive this financially?
Yeah.
And even though my parents made me feel so safe, I was too prideful to go back to them and say, hey, I really need financial help through this. And I think looking back, if I could, in many ways, I think that created some character in me, but I wish I wouldn't have made it so unnecessarily difficult. I went through some really challenging times that in hindsight, I probably didn't need to go to. And as a result, and that was directly because of pride. Pride comes from both the top and the bottom. It can be, it's not an attractive trait. And so I definitely felt pressure to succeed from myself in so many ways, and to prove myself and to make a name for myself. A lot of that.
A perception of judgment because of who your parents or your family was, or was that just organic within yourself for some reason?
Yeah, I don't know. I think what's interesting is that I think you see this in quote unquote successful families a lot, where you have kids, they tend to go one way or the other. And I'm not sure all the reasons. Some of it might be genetic, by the way. But for whatever reason, there was a real drive in me to prove myself. And I have friends, and I have, dare I say, siblings who maybe are not wired the same way. But I think that I think it's just part of, I don't think it was nurture. I think it's nature. And I nature wise was wired like, I got to do something. I've got to prove myself. I was so committed to doing that. And like I say, it's not all good. There's a level of unhealthiness about that. And so to get to your point about, on the kids front, one of the things that my wife and I talk about is we're raising our kids in Fairfield County, Connecticut, which is one of the wealthiest areas of the country. And they are surrounded by privilege at every stop. It's normal to them that kids have multiple homes and really nice cars, and it is an uphill battle to try and help them understand, one, how fortunate and blessed they are, and two, that not everyone has this same level of privilege and access, and what does that mean, and how do they think about that? And I really just try and remind myself that the best thing I can do is teach them correct principles and values, and help them learn to be curious and ask good questions. One of the best ways we've found to do that is to travel, and to do, in some cases when possible, service while traveling. But it's not easy. And I think one of the dangers of podcast platforms is people want to share their best. You asked about routine and habits. They want to share what the perfect day looks like, even though that's not their everyday. And the danger of a listener then becomes, well, in order to achieve success, or in order to achieve this milestone, I need to follow this exact script or this exact routine. And I will say I'm in the messy middle, right? Like, I'm working on it. I'm developing myself over time. And there are some things that have really worked for me, and that I have kind of really hold dear. And I'm trying to teach my kids that, without saying there's only one right way to live, or there's only, I want them more than anything to be appropriately curious and interested on asking good questions.
And I think, I mean, as you know, every kid is different. I've got three kids as well, two girls and a
So,
boy. How they're
yeah,
wired, as you mentioned earlier, how they absorb information, how they perceive the world, all of that is so different. And it's so fun to be a parent and to actually figure that out. I'm figuring it out right now with one of mine. And,
yeah.
how does she best learn, the good things, and but also learn, the negative things, and how to react in certain situations. And so I think being a
That's
parent is
such a
such
good point. Like, I mean, I'm curious from you, how do you then, knowing that your kids are different and they have different learning styles, how do you approach it when you're teaching them?
it's a work in progress. Like you just said, we have, I've got an 8-year-old who's my oldest. She's my angel.
Yeah,
She's good in school. She's good at home.
yeah,
She's good with her friends. She's always polite and behaves. And then, we've got the middle one. That's, I think you're a middle child.
yeah,
The messy middle for sure, and still
yeah,
figuring things out. She's 5 years old, but she needs that one-on-one time a lot more than her siblings. She needs that confidence from her parents and from her teachers and from her
mm,
peers, that she still loves no matter what, obviously, even when
yeah,
she makes mistakes. Whereas my oldest would be terrified to make a mistake. Like, she would be
right.
terrified to even do that. And
She's
it's like,
self motivated by that. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. And then my son is, typical boy. He's all over the place, just running around. But it's fun. I mean, we literally had a parent teacher conference today, and I was thinking about it. Like, I'm so grateful that we have the teachers and a community at our school. It's a Christian based private school. That I went to public school. I didn't have
yeah,
that, and the teachers really care. And it doesn't matter if you go to public school or private school, for the teachers to care. Um, but having a community around her that recognizes that she might be, need some extra TLC or need some extra things, and that they're willing to do that. She doesn't just go off into the ether and have to figure it out herself. And we're busy, right? Like, I'm busy. My wife is back at work, after many years at home. And so the time in the day is precious. One of the principles that I live by is I try not to travel, as much as I used to. I used to travel a lot. And when I
yeah,
do, I try my best to be in and out. I used to love the luxury of traveling for work.
right.
It's not as luxurious anymore. You've seen a lot of the places and been the same places. I'd rather be at home. So when I travel, I try to
Totally.
be in and out as quickly as possible. I try not to travel that much. And even when I'm home, it seems crazy, but I try to leave the office by 4:30 every day. My kids go to bed at a relatively early time, 7:30, 8 o'clock. I spend from 4:30 to 7:30 or 8 being as present of a dad as I can. I can always go back to work later, and I often do. But I recognize how little time we have as parents
Yeah,
as we're growing up, and how precious it is to spend with them. So, um, I was lucky enough to have mentors early on that showed me the good and the bad in terms of being a husband and a parent. And I had great parents, but I wouldn't say that I won the parent lottery, necessarily. And it's nothing against them. They just, they're hardworking, humble folks that were middle America. Um, and so just trying to be aware of how much time I can spend with them. And I'm not
yeah,
perfect by any stretch. So it's the ultimate job. Being entrepreneurs,
yeah.
being a father is the ultimate job. You know,
Well, you said something so important that I think is worth pausing on, and that is that your kids are different, and so your approach changes. And I sometimes hear parents say, perhaps, maybe unintentionally, well, I raise my kids all the same. And I'm like, well, then I would argue you're not a great parent, because the truth is that, you know, again, I'm a fan of the Bible, but Christ ministered to the one. And when you think about your kids, they have different needs. And so treating them the exact same, I think, is a mistake. Learning how they learn, learning how they feel loved, learning how they approach, it's okay appropriately within reason to cater to their needs, because that's what a great teacher does. I would argue that's what a great leader does. And a great leader knows his flock. They spend time understanding and getting to know them, and that's how those relationships of trust happen. And one of the challenges is doing that at scale. In your case, you've got multiple portfolio companies with lots of different employees. In our case, we're adding retail stores, which is adding a ton of, and my ability to keep up with the names and the lives and the families of these people is certainly being challenged. And so my next frontier is to make sure that I am building a team of people that I really trust to treat people with the same level of respect and dignity, and and create a culture where that's appropriate and successful. But I think, to your point on how we parent, um, I just think it. I think you need to know your kids and spend time with them. And I love that you've been so intentional about that 4:30 to 7:30 time slot, because it does go so fast. My oldest is a sophomore in high school. My wife is so tired of me saying, I'm like, we've got two more, like every family vacation. And she's like, please stop saying this. Can you just
I think
stop
that's
bringing
the
it up?
best.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Well,
yeah.
so there's two interesting routes, and thanks for sharing that. There's two interesting routes. I want to make sure that we focus on mental health, which is kind of a tangent here that we're touching on in a lot of ways. And then you just mentioned something about the business growth and how you can take your values and vision at the top and try to evangelize that down all the way to the janitorial staff or the retail worker or whatever. Let's go on the business path for a second. You've got a fabulous clothing brand. I'd love to ask you a couple
Thank you.
rapid fire questions, but then most importantly, let's tee it off with, you're a man of faith, I'm a man of faith. I've leaned into that much more in the last couple of years than I had previously. I didn't grow up in the church. I know, you grew up Mormon, if I remember
Hmm.
correctly. How do you, as a business leader, balance in today's age the values that you grew up with and you still hold today as a person, as a family man, and do that in a way that is quote unquote acceptable within
Mm.
business and the cancel culture and the divisiveness, everything that we have going on? You obviously represent a lot of great things with Rhone, but you lead from probably your faith and your initial values, right? So how do you balance those things?
I think it's enormously difficult in today's environment. And the world has gotten more noisy that way. Um, but I really try and go back to just the core principles. And, we've, during the COVID time period, it was really challenging because it felt like every cause was so acute and so important and needed to be discussed. And you had companies who, I think with good intention, were trying to make a positive impact, commenting on just about everything. And there were two sides of every, cause that people felt very strongly about. And commercially, that has its challenges, putting a statement down and saying, this is what we believe and this is what we practice. Um, and, culturally, institutionally, it has challenges if you do or don't. And I remember getting calls, asking, why haven't we made a statement about, A, B, C, or D? And I remember just feeling very thoughtful and reflective about it and not wanting to make a mistake or jeopardize. We had seen companies get hurt from,
Yeah.
being on the wrong side of the equation here. And I'm not asking for empathy or sympathy on this as a business leader. I don't know that, I think it's hard for everyone. But what I decided is our cause, our mission is people. And it's about teaching people about what we call mental fitness. And that's really about creating resilience within people. Because in the end, so much of the pain that is being caused comes from people who have experienced real pain. And it's hurt people that hurt people oftentimes. And we want to help people heal and find value in social connection and in themselves. And doing that in connection with movement, that is our mission. And so it became easier, not easy, it became easier to tell people, I love that you're passionate about this issue. And I encourage you to get involved and active on it in your personal life, um, because I think there's value in standing up for what you believe. But what Rhone is committed to is about mental fitness, and that is our platform, and that's what we're focused on, and that's what we donate to, and that's where we, give our time, energy, and effort. And if this cause that's important to you is more important than that and what you're doing for work, then you should go find a job or an activity that allows you to do that full time. And we had very few of those conversations, but there were, a couple that I can think of. And I think it's been so great for us because we have incredible diversity of background, thought, political ideation, religious affiliation within our organization. But everybody has a shared value of helping people find better, stronger mental resilience in their lives. And to me, that aligns directly with my faith because I do think that's how Christ led. He didn't go to the Pharisees. He went to those that were in the greatest need, and that's where he spent his time. And I certainly just try to follow that example, and fail, over and over and over and over again. But that's like, it's nice to have a true north to come back to and say, like, that's what I should be focused on. I should just try and do more and act in the way that he did, which was almost always out of charity.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, if I heard you correctly and I can pull that thread, you decided as a business leader that the business would represent something specific rather than appealing to all people and all charities and all ideations of different things. We can all have those personally, and we can pursue those on our personal time or professional time if we want. But you chose a lane and you said, this is our lane and it's purposeful from the top down, but we're not going to represent everything. And I think that's really interesting and important in today's age. I mean, every business leader, every person has the right to choose their passions. But I think it is very, as a business leader myself, it's tough to try to accommodate everybody. And so I think that's really shrewd to focus on one thing, mental fitness, mental resilience, as you said. You guys had to be one of the first really focusing on that in a meaningful way. If you were started in 2013, 2014, a lot of people are now on that train as a general topic. What have you learned over the last 11 years in terms of, one, your personal toolkit, but the stigma, what's available out there now that we have so many people focused on it? Like, what is the state of affairs for mental fitness, mental resilience? What does that mean to you? How do you, stay mentally fit? And, what are some things just topically that people should be aware of?
Yeah. I might monologue for a little bit here. So Marley, interrupt me if I get too long winded. I think that when we started, mental health felt taboo to talk about. It was 2013, 2014, and it still was not. Today, it's become mainstream, and I would say at the time, it felt like mental health had a PR problem. It doesn't have a PR problem or an awareness problem anymore because it's not uncommon for this to come up in schools, in sports teams, in almost every walk of life. It's being mentioned, and there's a reason for that. It's a problem, and it's a serious, serious problem. And we take it lightly at our own families and our own communities' risk. If you look at the data, almost every important metric in and around mental health has gotten substantially worse over the last decade. And we could spend a lot of time talking about all the reasons why. And I have lots of theories, and then I think there's some data to support some of those theories.
What are some of those KPIs? Is it suicide rates? Like, what are the KPIs when you say the state of affairs for mental health is drastically worse than it even was 10 years ago?
Well, some of it has increased just based on measurement and focus and attention. But then there are things like suicide rate, amount of alcohol addiction, documented depression, cases of anxiety, et cetera. Amount of hours being dedicated towards therapy, the amount of mental health leave that's being given at companies. So some of that could be directly attributed to just sheer volume of focus and effort and attention. But things like suicide rate, that's a stat. And when you look at it, I don't want to be misquoted on this, but the last statistic that I looked at is it went from the number 14 cause of death among teenagers to the number 2 cause of death over the last 10 or 11 years. That's a frightening statistic. It is, next to heart disease, it's the number 1 it's the next highest cause of death among men ages 30 to 50. And so it's a real problem. And again, from the cause standpoint, I think you could point to a few different things. The breakdown of communities in and around globally. It's not just a domestic problem; it's also an international problem. Attention to and addiction to smartphones. There's almost a one-to-one correlation as you watch smartphone penetration, and then you watch the amount of addiction, suicide, how it ticks up. It's wild. And the side-by-side charts, kind of stand for this being an issue. But really, all that stems back down to the same thing: is we're spending less time with each other,
Yep.
and that's causing, I think, more than anything else, that's causing part of the problems. No matter what your belief system is, I think most people would acknowledge is that we are connected as a humanity in some very rich and meaningful way. And I used the example of aspen trees the other day, where it's, aspen trees, if you see a big forest of aspen trees, it's technically actually one organism that is sprouting roots all over, and the aspen trees pop up, but it's really one organism. And in a lot of ways, I feel like humanity is that way, especially within communities. The more time you spend with each other, the more connectivity there is. And when one person is suffering, there's a feeling that kind of pervades through. And if you don't believe in this, go get in a group setting and have one person smile and see how that snaps through, right? We are connected in meaningful ways. And I think we're starting to realize the problems that we've created over the last 12 to 15 years. One, it's being talked about. And two, it's starting to be addressed. But I think one of the biggest issues is that when you bring up mental health, people immediately associate mental health with mental illness, right? If I say mental health to you, the first thing that most people think about is depression, anxiety, suicide, including myself. I mean, there's just such a deep connection between those terms, mental health and mental illness. If I say physical health to you, you don't immediately jump to cardiovascular disease or diabetes or, cancer. You think most likely about fitness, nutrition, sleep, taking care of your body. And so the reason why we started intentionally using this term mental fitness is when I use the term mental health, people feel heavy and they feel like, I don't know how to solve this. This is too complicated. There's nothing I can do. Society's just moved in this direction and it's a big problem. And I'm worried about myself and I'm worried about my kids and I'm worried about my cousin and I'm worried about. But if I say mental fitness, it feels actionable. It feels like there's something you can do about it. And so you use the word toolkit, which is a word that we use a lot in our company. Part of what we're trying to teach people about mental fitness is that there are things that you can do about them. Your physical fitness is a direct result, oftentimes, of obviously genes play a big part in it, but what are you choosing to do with your day? Are you going to bed at a decent hour? Are you waking up and, getting a good amount of sleep? That's probably bucket number one. Are you hydrating your body? Are you moving your body? Are you eating good, healthy foods? Da 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 da. Mental fitness is not different. What kind of content are you consuming? What thoughts are you practicing? Are you creating space and time and energy to unplug and not have constant inbound communication, whether it's podcasting or whatever else there is? We have so much noise coming at us all the time. When are you finding the time to be still? Are you serving others? Are you practicing gratitude? Have you figured out how to use your own breath to deregulate your nervous system, downregulate your nervous system? And so there's lots of things that you can do. And that's what I want when we talk about mental health. I kind of separate the clinical from the everyday. And we are not an organization that can help with the clinical. There's lots of organizations dedicated towards that. But we are an organization committed to educating people that everybody can play a role in this. And even if you feel totally mentally fit all the time, which I would argue none of us ever do, but even if you feel mentally fit the entire time, the reason why you need to know about this and understand this is because eventually it's going to impact you one way or the other, either directly or through someone that you love. The statistics are, that every single one of us knows somebody who's struggling. And so we need to understand this so that we can better help them.
Yeah, I love that. Are there companies, whether they're product related, service related, or otherwise. And going back to your Aspen tree and our talk about kids, every person is different. So I don't want to say what is right for Nate Checketts or what he uses is what everyone should go and buy or purchase. But what are some of the companies that you believe are adding the most delta to this in a wide swath of populace? What are things that you use, tricks, toolkit, otherwise?
Mm,
You mentioned the breathing. Like there's simple things out there that people, unless they take the time to go find, don't even hear sometimes.
yeah. So I went to this conference last year that was put on by a really good friend of mine named Jeff Byers, who he runs a company called Momentous, and they're a great supplement brand.
I love that.
High,
We
yeah.
have a company named Momentous. I love that.
Oh, really? High quality supplementation that's used by the U.S. military, a lot of professional sports teams. Jeff is a former NFL player. Company's based in Park City. Really smart group, and some of the best in class supplements that I've seen in the market. And so he had this. Calling it a conference would be generous. There was like 25 of us, but it was like the head of human health and performance at Red Bull and of the Philadelphia Flyers and Kelly Starrett, who's the godfather of modern mobility movement, and coaches Olympians and athletes. So really interesting. Some of the smartest people I've ever seen in the field of human health and performance. And we started by talking about the challenge that we have societally today is people want hacks. They want these hacks to like help them cure things quickly. And the reality is that there's a foundation of practices that we can do that consistently will move the needle better than anything else. And one of the conversations we ended up having is that Western medicine is best in the world, best in class at treating the body like a machine. When a machine breaks, you go in, you change out a part, you put in a new part, or this is broken, we know how to fix it. But where Western medicine has struggled is in preventative care, because again, we're so good at solving something that's wrong. Eastern medicine has the opposite problem. It treats the body like a garden. So it's really good at the preventative stuff, but then when something goes wrong, they don't know how to handle it. And they try and bring these preventative care, and it doesn't treat the problem. The reality is you need both approaches. So I think that's an important kind of foundation to understand as it relates to mental health. There are things that you can do in the moment when you are having a challenge or a problem. For example, one of the most common practices that have been embraced today is box breathing or down regulation breathing techniques. So there's two that we teach people. We even have pass along cards that will give them. Box breathing is called box breathing because what it is you inhale for 4 seconds, hold your breath for 4 seconds, exhale for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, and then repeat. If you do that 4 to 5 times, you will immediately bring your heart rate down. So when anxiety and fear take over, your heart rate's going up, it's sending your body into fight or flight, and you need to down regulate that nervous system to start to be calm, to make better decisions. There's another breathing technique that Dr. Andrew Huberman talks a lot about, which is what he calls the audible sigh. And it's 2 sharp inhales through your nose and then kind of an overtly loud audible sigh. And you hear babies and children do this. Like you've probably seen your own kids do this. They start crying so hard, and then all of a sudden they go, and it is amazing how well it works. And I've taught high school kids about this. I've taught my own kids about this. It's a powerful thing. They're embarrassed to do it. And I say, go to your car, go to the bathroom, just find a way to down regulate. And so those are more of the treat the body as a machine approach. And then there are other things like, again, rest, gratitude, prayer, sauna. You've seen a huge movement towards sauna and cold plunge culture. All that is it's using kind of an artificial stressing technique to build resilience in that central nervous system so that you have the ability to stay calm under pressure. And, I started getting into kind of the cold plunge thing almost 10 years ago. And I would say it's meaningfully impacted my life and my ability to handle stress. And I'm not always great at being in there consistently because I still hate it 10 years later. One of the funny things is people are like, why do people love getting in a cold plunge? I'm like, you're missing the entire thread of this movement. It's about, we live in the most comfortable world that has ever been created. We go from air-conditioned homes to air-conditioned cars to air-conditioned places of work. The average American, 93% of Americans spend less than an hour outside every single day. And so we have to artificially create challenging environments, both for our body and our mind, so that when actual stress comes, your dog dies, your mom gets cancer, you have to move because of a job, you're more prepared. Because if you don't prepare yourself, when those moments come, you're going to have a much more difficult time. And so, that it's a long answer to a short question, but it's really, really important. You need both of those kind of longer term thinking, short term immediate actions to put in your toolkit so that you can start to take better care of yourself.
Yeah. You won't be successful at golf if you don't have a driver and a putter in your toolkit.
Yeah, it's a really good comparison. Yeah.
And I did my cryotherapy and my red light yesterday. I've been on
Good man
for a couple of years. And, it's one of those things where I do feel better, but you just have to trust the process as well. Like there's studies out there,
Yep.
There's all the things. You just have to trust that you're making those small investments in the longevity and the things that maybe, some people get a great, push from the cold plunge, obviously, but sometimes you don't see the work. But obviously if you go to the gym every day and then you look in the mirror 2 years later, you look like a different person.
Yeah.
So true.
So true.
Well, I want to spend a minute on business. You've been so thoughtful and humble in everything that you've talked about here. Some people might be asking, why is he in the apparel business? We apparel, everything. And if you were listening to this, you obviously know it's a lot to do with impact and what you can actually do. The messages on the Rhone brand of clothing and some of the inspiration is phenomenal. But why, a lot of the audience that listens to me, all three people, is investors and entrepreneurs.
Mm-hmm.
And so why would you be in the apparel business today? Why does it make financial sense? How have you built such a great company in a world, like you said, that is so, there's so many options and so many legacy options. From an investment and an entrepreneurial standpoint, why would you get back into the apparel business today if you would? Which I hope.
Yeah, it's funny because I have, on a very regular basis, I don't know what cadence I would call it, but it is very common that I get asked the question like, hey, I'm thinking about starting my own clothing brand or getting into the world of fashion or apparel. What would you recommend as the first step? And I feel a little bit guilty saying this, but genuinely what I say to people is I say, all right, here's what I need you to do. Go find a really comfortable place, lay down and wait for this feeling to pass, and then go do something else. I mean, it is honestly such a hard business. I don't think I completely underestimated how challenging of a business it is. But I think that's why we got started. And so the reality is, as I say to people, like, you have to embrace your own ignorance in starting. And we came into this not from the industry. And so we challenged a lot of the ways things were being done. I remember having a conversation with one of our manufacturers, and they were like, you're overspending on the fabric in pockets because nobody cares about the pocket fabric. They just care about the fabric next to their body. I was like, that's not true. I was like, I care about it. I put my hand in my pocket to pull out my wallet or my phone. And like, so I don't want it to be itchy and scratchy and not comfortable. Like, I get that that's cheaper and I can save some bucks on the make, but I want it to be the best garment in the industry. I want it to be literally the best quality. That when somebody gets it and washes it, they say everything in their closet is clean. Like, I can't wait to put that Rhone shirt on or those Rhone shorts or those Rhone pants back on. I want it to be the first thing that they want to have out of their closet. And so what I love about the apparel business is that there's texture to it. and I came from the world of software. Like I couldn't hand somebody something. I could give someone an experience with software, but I couldn't hand them a tangible good. And clothing is so intimate. It's close to your body. You wear it for hours at a time, and it impacts your confidence level. It impacts, how you feel, your comfort, etc. So I love the tangibility of the apparel, side of the business. But before starting Rhone, I had made a commitment that I was going to build a business of impact and a business that mattered. And I knew that for me, that wasn't going to mean like I was going into nonprofit work, but that I could build a business that stood for something more than just the business that we were in. And I think some people are attracted to business industry, meaning like I have to work in music, or I have to work in sports, or I have to work in finance. And some people are attracted to, like business product. So like I need to work in apparel, or I need to work in fashion, or they're attracted to stage. And I'm more of the latter of those. Like for me, I wanted to build something, and it didn't really matter what the industry was, which I know sounds crazy, but for me, it's true. Like we could be
Business
selling,
is the best
yeah,
thing for.
yeah, it's just the transportation mechanism to do the thing that we believe the most in. And it's a really effective, good transportation engine for that, complicated beyond all imagination. Um, but I really am so grateful to have the opportunity that we have. And we're still figuring it out. We're in that messy middle. I think we have an amazing company culture and team, and that's because of them. It's not simply because of me or my brother. Everyone who comes adds to that, and we still make mistakes, and we still have challenges, and we're figuring that out. And the main thing is we just can't lose the thread. We can't lose the intention with which we're creating, no matter how much success we have, because as soon as you take that for granted, then it all goes to the wayside.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to end with a couple quick rapid fire questions. But before that, you touched on something that is poignant for us selfishly. We get asked to invest in a lot of different companies alongside great private equity firms, either alongside them or independently of them or otherwise. And in a world where, profit and capitalism is key, obviously you have to make profit to be
No
able to make
question.
all the impact that you have. And I know you've had some great partners over the past, and your family run business through a lot of that as well. How do you look at the season of business that Rhone is in today and the growth that could happen, and how to
Mm.
make decisions about capital partners, whether it's yourselves organically growing at your own pace, or for a lot of the folks, they're looking at us or others and saying, hey, we could go 3x what we're doing right now, but that comes with a lot of complication. Or if we go with this private equity firm, we have to go 10x it just to hit their metrics, and we have to exit in 5 years and sell the company. What are some of the things that you think about as a business leader on the financial side, in making some of those decisions?
I feel like before raising capital, I heard so many people say to me, be so careful, be so thoughtful, because your capital partners will really be your partners, and you could arguably end up spending, more time with them than anybody else. And they have the ability to shape and determine, your long-term destiny. And I remember thinking like, okay, I get that. If you have lots of options, you want to pick the best option. But many times as an entrepreneur, you just feel like, I just need somebody to give me the access, and then I'll do all the work, and I just need them to get out of the way. And the reality is, both can be true, right? Like you really do need to be, there is no amount of money that is worth having a bad partner, because they will screw up your business faster than anything else. And I have seen it in companies. And I would say for every great company that private equity has assisted, there's a graveyard full of businesses that private equity has failed, or at least from a relationship standpoint, that it hasn't worked out. And having high quality people and high quality partners who know how to act when things get hard and challenging, as they do in every business, is so critical. And it's not enough for people to be smart. You really want people of high integrity, high character. and that you feel your value system aligns with. Um, and and ultimately that's been true in our case. We've been fortunate. We had a great private equity fund in El Caterton, and then they owned a minority piece of the business. But what what we started focusing on is a longer hold time, and we were able to work through with them the ability for us to own it and fully control it as a family. And that's been a huge blessing. Since doing that transaction, the company's tripled in size. And um, so so yeah, I think it's important, and I think spending time with good quality people and the content of the character that you and have around the table is really, really important.
Yeah. I think selfishly, I think family offices and other types of investment platforms, similar to us or otherwise, are going to be, I don't want to say a reinvention of private equity over the last 10 or 15 years, but to your point, there's been a lot of great winners, but there's now a dialogue about, hey, when I think about a capital partner, I don't want to be at the mercy of having to churn and burn and grow at some crazy pace and then just for the private equity firm to exit us in a couple of years. Like, we want more patient, strategic, thoughtful capital that is more legacy driven, whether it's 10 years or 20 years or 30 years or 100 years. I
Yeah,
think more people are thinking about that, and it's an interesting discussion point that honestly comes to us all the time is, wow,
yeah,
you guys are a lot different than other firms that we talk to, because you don't have those. We still want to make money, of course, on our money, but
right.
you don't have to exit in 3 years at a 500% return. That's crazy.
Yeah, yeah. I feel very strongly about this, and I think structurally, so many private equity venture capital firms are set up to like not achieve the optimal result because it assumes that every company's arc is going to move in the same way, and most don't. And so you're being forced to make bad decisions because of the structure that you have behind you. And I tell everyone the best investors, without question, by far, have been family offices, because oftentimes those family offices are rooted or funded by an operating business of some kind. So you have people who understand the mechanisms that actually drive business results, and so they're willing to open doors and drive relationships and say, how can we be helpful, and they're thinking long term. Oftentimes, what I've seen is, private equity, they've got to deploy the capital and then they've got to raise the next fund. So they're either deploying capital or they're raising the next fund. And when that happens, they're like, hey, will you speak to this next entrepreneur and tell them how great we are? And I'm like, well, I'm not sure. And then it's like, hey, will you tell this, big institution that we want to invest and put a bunch of institutional capital in how great of partners we are? And I'm like, okay, at some point, can you be the great partners that you want me to keep telling
Wow.
people you are? You know,
Wow.
that's
Great.
that that's part of the challenge. You don't have that at all in family offices.
Yeah. No, I love that. Well, thank you. Thank you for that perspective. All right. 2 minutes. If you've got that rapid fire, you
Yeah.
good with that?
Yep. Let's do it.
So outside of Rhone, what is your favorite brand, whether clothing or otherwise, that I know you're not a brand guy. You've said that in the past. What other brands do you love?
I really love the brand Rivian right now. I was one of the first Rivian truck owners in the country, and I don't know if it's a good company. I would argue they're losing a ton of money, but I really love the way they've done their branding and their intention.
What brand is most popular? You mentioned one of your sons is sophomore. Is there a brand that you're paying attention to that your kids are bringing you, and you're like, oh, that's interesting, just for a variety of reasons? Is there anything that generation's bringing you that is popping up?
It's funny. I pay really close attention to this, and I ask my kids, because I've also angel invested in about 50 consumer brands. And what's interesting to me is what's old is new again. I feel like some legacy brands are kind of finding new footing. It's amazing to watch what New Balance is doing in particular, and how they can be both like the dad shoe brand, but also the hip, young, new brand. Um, and also watching Nike's demise right now, I think they're finding, for no pun intended, a better footing recently, but they've really struggled over the last 5 years. And you're seeing, that's made huge inroads for brands like Hoka and other running specific brands to come in and fill some of that gap. So, yeah, there's nobody that really jumps out to me today.
Yeah, but the nostalgic brands, we're seeing that. We do a lot of work on even the food and beverage side. Nostalgic brands are coming back alive and different things. So
Totally.
I think it's a tie to our grandfather's generation. I know you're a
You know what?
healthy guy.
I was going to say there's one brand that my kids have gotten really into recently. It was started by a YouTuber named Ryan Trahan, and it's man, I'm blanking on the name of it. It's a candy. It's a better for you candy brand. Oh man, we've bought it a number of times, but these kids are going to like Target and 7-Eleven. They're like, we got to go in and see if they have this. It's one of the most genius marketing efforts I've seen. And this kid is so genuine on YouTube. Seems like just a really great young
Are they
Christian
buying it because
YouTuber.
of the marketing aspect or because it's better for you or everything?
It's everything. You know, we've tried giving them like healthier candy in the past. Um, I'll tell you, it's called Joyride is the name of the brand,
Joyride.
and I'm telling you, this thing is it's probably already passed, but it's on its way. I think it's going to be a huge home run.
Okay, awesome. Last thing, going back to family, you said it yourself. You hit the parent lottery. Is there a tradition or something you guys do as a family that either your parents taught you or that you've done and you're so proud of? You know, for me, it's simple, but you know, I grew up watching Home Alone, and I never traveled as a kid. We just didn't have the funds to do it, and so now I take my kids to New York City every Christmas time and
Oh,
spend
that's
a
awesome.
couple days there, and like we love that trip. Is there
Yeah,
something that you do with your kids or your family that you really enjoy?
Home Alone 2 is such a great movie. Um, and we live close to New York City, so we'll have to hang out next time you're here. We are big fans and believers in tradition, but probably the most foundational tradition for us actually isn't with the kids. It's my wife and I. We started about 8 years ago. It was my birthday, and I actually it was my wife's birthday. Is the true story. We're 3 weeks apart, so they kind of blend together sometimes. And I surprised her by taking her to this really awesome bed and breakfast place, like 2 hours away. And I packed all the bags for her, and we got there. And as I was unloading the car, I pulled out a stand up whiteboard. And she's like, "What is wrong? What do you think is happening here?" I'm like, "We're going to have a 3-day family planning offsite." And we did. And we spoke about our routines, our intentions. You know, we spoke about each child individually, what they need, what they, what we could be working on. And we've done it every year. And we come out with like a 3-page planning document on what we're going to either do more of, less of, stop doing, and it came from advice that was given to me. Like, are you giving the same level of intention and attention to your family that you're giving your workplace? And I was like, we do long range planning at work. Why am I not doing that at my home? And so we have so many things that have come from those planning sessions. And so I would say that is our most foundational tradition that my wife and I look forward to. And it's changed locations and it's changed formats, but we do that every single year.
That's awesome. I love that. I'm going to have to get an example of that. It's really hit me hard lately that I listen to a lot of business podcasts. I read a lot of business books. I do all these business meetings and things, and I try to be an intentional dad. But why don't I listen to how to be a better dad podcast on the drive instead of
Yeah.
business and
Yeah.
different things? So I love that. I would love to understand how that works. My kids are still 4, 5, and 8, so they might be a little bit young, but maybe not.
Yeah. No, I
Just
think it starts now. And there's a word that I really love because everybody wants to talk about balance. But I think balance is such a tricky word because it changes, right? Like you will have periods of intense business activity, especially if you're working on a deal and you've got to be grinding. And then you'll have periods where it's less intense and you're able to spend and focus more time on your family. And maybe you get even too distracted by that and you're not getting your work done. And so I think balance kind of creates a false paradigm by which you're like, every bucket needs to be full. But I love the word harmony in the sense that, like, when I'm doing it right, my home life is positively impacted by my business life. And my business life is positively impacted by my home life. I'm learning something from my interactions with my kids or my wife that I'm bringing into the workplace, or I'm learning something from the workplace that I'm bringing into my family. And that's why I love that idea of harmony. And so, to your example, like, you could and should listen to both, but there's also practicality in taking lessons from either and then bringing them to each other.
so true. So true. Because I get my fuel and my energy a lot of the time to be a better dad, a better husband by doing well in work. And so if I'm able to harmonize
Totally
with
true.
that bucket, then maybe I can do that
Same.
unintentionally, but intentionally. Well, Nate, super thankful for the time, man. We love the brand. I introduced you
Thank
to
you.
my wife as well. We're big believers. Hopefully, see more retail locations coming soon. But I know you guys do a lot online, so I'm excited to see kind of the growth of the physical footprint of
Thank
that,
you.
and just super thankful for you sharing your perspective and your wisdom. And thank you so much.
Thank you. Loved it.